we're in the field of doing software development, and most people don't pay much attention to the fact that computers are just downright really, really good at automating things and making your life simpler and easier and faster. They pay a great deal of attention to building some application for someone else to make their life easier, simpler, and faster, but how much time do they pay attention to the process of building an application for the development process itself to make it easier? One of the books that came out probably 25 years ago that has had a tremendous impact on the entire field of software development is called The Pragmatic Programmer. And one of the principles in it, it's not a book of this is how you implement in a certain language or algorithms. It's a practical book of how you build software. Is a technology called, or a principle called dry. Do everything just once and don't repeat yourself. And this dry principle has had a tremendous impact on lots of programming languages and lots of environments. But basically the idea is you need to build things that are tools for the development process itself and automate that process. This entire automation process for development has become an entire field of endeavor in most businesses, and it's a really critical piece of the process for making it efficient to build what you're trying to build. So a lot of what we're going to talk about here is how do we apply the technologies that are available to software development for the process of making you more efficient and a better developer. And some of these things have very measurable consequences. For instance, there is a tool that I use that people that use it on average in industry make 14% more income than those that don't. So, this is a real application that, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to learn how to use the one that makes more money, because that's what I'm after is, trading my time for money as a developer. I want to get the most out of my time. There are nice things that are about a GUI, like it's easy to learn, and it can be really useful, but it has its disadvantages. Now, we're going to be working mostly off of my Macintosh for my demos, but you can do these things on a Windows system. You install the Git package on your Windows system, and it comes with a thing called MinGW. MinGW is a Unix system. These days, Microsoft also has a Linux system built into Windows that I see just today is finally being released for general purpose. But either way, if you are going to look at this, we're going to look at the Bourne shell. And it's been around for a long time. It is a replacement. It's called Bash for the Born Again shell. And that's not a religious metaphor. It is implemented by a guy named Bourne, Michael Bourne. But it was a replacement for the SH shell. And the SH shell was built in 66 to 1969. So it's older than most people in this class. And it's still in heavy use. Isn't that interesting? If you look at things like a thermometer, the light bulb that's behind my head, that has access over the web, you'll find that it has a thing called BusyBox on it. BusyBox includes the original SH shell. So lots of things are running the SH shell, but for interactive use, I tend to prefer something with a little bit more capability than something that was built in 1966 to 69. So I tend to use Bash as a default. There is a replacement for Bash, since it's about 20 years old, called ZSH, which is now the default on Macintoshes, and I use it on Linux as well, so it has even more capabilities. But it's a superset of these other older shells. They didn't get rid of anything, they just added more stuff to it and tested it and made it more useful. But the SH shell, or A shell, it's a language, and you're sitting inside an interpreter that does a fetch-execute cycle, where you have the capabilities of a language at your disposal. And we're going to look at some of the individual pieces of that language, and then we're going to move on to how do I construct bigger or more complicated things with this language. Probably the most difficult thing for me in using GUI applications is a GUI application, by and large, you are limited to what that application does. I mean, if there's a button that does exactly what you want, it's great. If there isn't a button for that, you can't go and extend it. You can't add something to it. You got to use a completely different tool, or you just can't do it at all. It's limited to all those things that the people who developed it thought you were going to do with it. So, I'm one of these people that says, oh, I've got a screwdriver, and by golly, I need to take the screwdriver at this moment in time, and really what I needed was a chisel, but I don't have a chisel, but the end is sharp enough. I'll grab the hammer and I'll use it as a chisel. And that's the way that most software is built. It's not necessarily that you're building exactly what they want. You're not just twisting a screw or filling in a form. You are actually building something new, and you need to use it in new and different ways. So it's not as limiting as that. This is a case where, oh, I've got a screwdriver and I really needed a chisel. Oh, here's a grinding stone. Let's take the screwdriver and add the grinding stone to it, and suddenly I can sharpen it, and it makes a pretty darn good chisel now. So that's the power of languages, and that's what we're going to do with this. Let's look at our first command. One of the first things I usually look for in any programming language is, how do I print something? How do I get some feedback from the computer? How do I get some output? And there's an echo command. Echo in the shell. I'm going to run it for you. Allows you to get some output. You'll notice the first time I quoted it, the second time I didn't. We'll get to what those quote marks did for me. But I get some output. I can get bigger output. You notice it took the spaces out. But basically I can print something out. So, that's kind of, I'm on the outside, so the first thing I want to do is get some output and see something print. Now, what do the spaces do? It's a little thing, but I'm excited. I just wrote something in a computer and got some output. Now, you'll notice that the second time I did this, it removed my spaces. But let's do it and save the spaces. If I put a quote mark in, now it saves the spaces in between. It doesn't discard them. So this is one kind of a quote mark, and we'll get to what the different quote marks mean. But I can use either kind of quote mark.